Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer, and slight apologies for the slight delay. I should say apologies for the slight delay. Getting a little jumbled up with words here because I have been laughing my guts off with Professor RV cracking joke. Professor RV, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you, sir?
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Namaste,
namaskaram. The well of humor of Professor RV never runs dry. So he was telling me that Trump and Xi were talking for close to an hour. Did you say 1 hour, sir?
No, time I am not sure, but they did have a long duration talk.
Long discussion, and Trump tried to persuade Xi Jinping to attend his inaugural ceremony, and Xi appears to have declined. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. See, starting with the late 50s till something like 80s, the US and USSR had a primary conflict in the world. The world, there was actually what you may recall non-aligned countries, those which are neither with US nor with USSR. In those days, it was USSR, not Russia. So that carried on for a long period of time till the USSR became Russia. In the late 80s, many of you will recall, there was internal turmoil, and 𝗏𝗏𝗏 announced acceptance, and the Berlin Wall fell down and other things. But primarily, it was an ideological issue. US somehow felt USSR's communism may be spreading to other parts of the world, whether it is Africa in terms of this Angola and various other places, or whether it is Vietnam in the east side, and Cuba in its own doorstep. And that was one of the, they were not so much worried about other issues of USSR, even though USSR was the first country to send the satellite into the orbit at that point of time. But then they proved that they can send it to the moon and other things. Anyhow, that was not a major. The major thing was the worry of US that the communism of USSR may spread to other countries, and it could encircle US. That is one. Second is most important thing we should know about US is, in its 2050 years of history, it always had an enemy. See, US without enemy is unimaginable. If it is no enemy there, it will invent an enemy. That is most important. So that's the one which in the earlier time, the body bags used to come, and it used to be, very much what one can call appreciated and other thing. And if you go to Washington, you will find there is a memorial. You can actually, if you go to Washington, I will suggest you should do one thing. From the Capitol Hill on one end to the memorial of these soldiers, you can take
Arlington
a walk.
Cemetery. Yeah.
Arlington, you can take a walk. You will come across all these various Jeffersons and this and that, and also the Vietnam thing in between. And then finally you will, so that will be an interesting thing. You can go by walk on if it is of course not in the winter or anything. I'm telling about one of those acceptable situation. So Arlington Cemetery used to be there. But things have changed thoroughly after the fall of Soviet Union. Then it became, this what one can call your major events took place around this Taliban and Islam, and then Afghanistan and withdrawal from Afghanistan. Then there is a confusion in US about identifying the enemy. There is one group which says that Islam is, but US is not facing as much Islam pressure as Europe, for instance. And we should mention, we have been telling Europe is the Eurobia for a long period of time, and now events are to some extent proving what we were telling. Now we are telling today, on this auspicious day of 17th, of what one can call January, 3 days after Pongal. And we are telling next 10 years, the major conflict in the world is going to be between US and China. US and China, that's not strictly a ideological conflict, because nobody takes seriously that China is a communist country. Incidentally, in the world today, there are no communist places at all, except that 𝗤𝗏 outside JNU, where people sit together and talk about the revolution, and some areas of Kerala, where still people think that communism is there. Only communist country which you may call it is North Korea, where that short, fat fellow comes out once in 15 days, sends a missile to the sky, and then goes inside in palace. That's all. And it is rumored his sister is going to succeed him, his daughter is going to succeed him, and all that. The only country. Cuba is no more a communist country. Cuba is allowing actually private enterprise. China calls officially its state ideology to be socialist market economy, whatever it is called. It can be something like a hot ice cream. I have never experienced it. Socialist market economy. We used to call ourselves as a mixed economy, and that's a slightly different thing. So China is also not a communist country. The conflict between US and China is primarily going to arise out of technology and who is going to be the major power in the world. Already China is, according to me, if you ask me, is the single superpower in the world. If you take IMF data, the global situation on nominal term, that means without adjusting for any issue of inflation, forex fluctuation, nothing, just convert it into dollar. If you take it, the US GDP is 27 trillion US dollar, and China is 18 trillion. Japan is 5 trillion, Germany is 4.2 trillion, we are 3.5 trillion. This is the picture of 2023. 2024 data is still to be released, except for China. We will come to that. But if you adjust for inflation, forex fluctuations, and other thing, what is called purchasing power parity basis, because the purchasing power is different in different location. My niece at California earns, let's say, 50,000, and I am also earning 50,000 in Bangalore. It's not that both of us are same. I can hire a housemaid at Bangalore for something like, let's say, 6,000, 7,000 per month. 6,000, 7,000 rupees in order to do the floor, to do the clothes, as well as to do some extra in terms of vessels and other things. My niece in US, per hour she has to spend sometime $60 to $80. And of course, that's mainly Venezuelan woman or Mexican woman or some of those people. If they don't have any papers, then the rates is slightly lower per hour. If you take 80 rupees even at 60, it comes to something like 5,000 rupees. So what I pay per month, she has to pay per hour. So it's not easy to compare and say both of us are 50,000, so we are no. And similarly, in the other side, if you take issues like food items and milk and vegetables and other thing, she spends something like 10 to 12% of our income only. Whereas I spend roughly 50 to 60% of my income. So it's an Engels curve. It's called that. Lower income people try to spend significantly more on food items. So what I want to stress is the purchasing power parity index of IMF adjusts for these things and tries to present the picture of GDP, the picture of national income of countries. On that basis, 2023, China is 34 trillion US dollar. Their PPP based national income, 34 trillion. US is 24 trillion. US is number 2. China is number 1. India is 17 trillion. Japan is 6 trillion. So from that point of view, India is third. But even there, kindly note, we are half of China. China is 33. We are only 16. So this is not, and US is somewhere around 24. So nominal term, India is 4 trillion, 3.7 trillion. China is 17 trillion. So you can see the gap between India and China is very large. Even though we are going on telling that we are third largest, but 1 and 2 and 3 is huge amount of gap is there. And other dimensions, if you look at, for instance, you should know this, China has got something like 3.6 trillion US dollar as its forex reserves, foreign exchange reserves. That's same as India's GDP. Our forex reserves are, something like $500 billion, 500 billion US dollar only. So on some of these counts, we are, for instance, the recently released data says China's trade surplus is 1 trillion US dollar. Note it again, China's trade surplus. Trade surplus is the difference between its export and import. It's a positive thing for China. Whereas India's trade surplus is not much. Recently, once we achieved something like 40 billion US dollar or something. Our surplus was sometime with US. And with China, it's always a deficit. Anyhow, China's trade surplus is 1 trillion. And China's manufacturing output in the world is 35% of the world manufacturing output. So China is far, far away from what we can think of. One reason could be they started in the 70s. Their reform process, another thing. While as we started somewhere in the 90s only. Till then we were telling about socialistic pattern and dominant role by the state, another thing. Till our Narasimha Rao came, our position was not, what one can call different than what we were earlier. So China started the reform much earlier. Thanks Sharma, their forex reserve, he says, is 3.26, while as India's forex reserve is 626 billion. So this is a very, very, very huge amount of difference between us. And manufacturing wise, actually there was a nice article in Economist last year where it told, the construction industry, if you look around and the huge amount of cranes are seen everywhere. They have these cranes for lifting articles and sending in. So the very interesting, Economist pointed out, 2/3 of the world crane is located in some 7 or 8 cities of China. Of course, China is having some cyclical issues, some problems. This year they reached only 5% of the growth rate, whereas we are still above 6%. But that doesn't make it any less power or anything. They have a huge amount of population also, and they're, of course, usual thing is they are autocratic, they don't have freedom and all that. aside from that. And the US is not a country which is worried about those things. In the sense, if you ask in the history of US, if you see, they are much more comfortable in being in bed with autocrats and more than any democratic country or anything. US thinks that outside US countries can be autocratic. It is their choice, and it's much easier to deal with those countries, military rulers and other things, rather than the so-called democratic countries where there is a confusion. One. Second is Trump is taking over on Monday, unless something dramatic happens between today and Monday. Otherwise, because that Jack Sullivan, that NSA, who is going away, he made a very interesting observation. I wouldn't be seeing you again, another thing, unless there is some major development like that. I do not know what is the type of, is he meant for a black humor, or is he just wanted to create some curiosity, or God knows. And Trump is known for his personal predilections. He's very clear about it. He wants 100% loyalty to him. He has provided a big list of people of his own party who have supported him at some point of time or another thing, whose recommendation should not be made any position in his team. He has included Nick Haley, so many people in that actually. Unbelievable. He says, don't, if any of them is to be suggested, I am not going to accept. He claims that he already had 1,000 people in his team, and all of them are. Anyhow, his personal loyalty is extremely important for him. Some of you may or may not remember, he is not a hardcore Republican. That is one thing very, very important to note. He is not somebody who came from the grassroots as Republican. He is more like, to have an analogy, like Karnataka Chief Minister. He is not a congressman. He started with socialist group and then went into 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 group and then JDS, and then he shifted to Congress. But he has completely ingrained himself into Congress. He is much more than a born congressman. Same way, Trump is not a traditional Republican or anything. What I want to stress is he would prefer people who have got significant amount of loyalty to himself, that is to Trump himself, and quite a number are there. So his major Make America Great Again cannot be undertaken unless and until America maintains its technological and manufacturing and other type of capabilities in the world, which is going to be a major challenge from the point of view of China. For instance, he is going to increase the tariff on Chinese. This is one of the stupidest thing. If Chinese could produce goods which are attractive and which are very useful, I remember as early as the beginning of the century, most of the supermarkets I have visited in US, made in China was the dominant theme, particularly the screwdrivers and toys, and as in those days, humorously it used to be told, US exported what is called the poisonous treasury bills and the government bills, which had a phenomenal amount of problem, but China invested very massively in those debt instruments. But China in turn exported to US a lot of these toys, which have very, in those days, later on it was banned, another thing, toys which had a good amount of toxic. So you sold us toxic bonds, so we are selling you the toxic toys. In those days, almost every departmental store, every electronic item, electric item, small item, another thing, it was made in China. Very, very interested, very interesting. Lot of leather items, lot of you don't have to even look very closely, another thing. to know that that used to be the amount of, and obviously significant amount of domestic manufacturing would have suffered in US. And Trump understands that. He says he is not going to accept. Now, in his expansionist plans, he has mentioned about Greenland. He has mentioned about the Panama Canal. Of course, he has also lightheartedly, I don't know how serious he is, of including Canada as the 51st state. But most important, Greenland is because of the Arctic. He doesn't want China to have any major, share in the Arctic side of the segment of the world. That is his main thing. And in that context, there is going to build pressure on many countries. Now the inner, smaller circle around China, China is able to influence Pakistan, Sri Lanka. Recently, China told Sri Lanka is one of the major, what one can call axis in terms of its influence in Asia. It has openly told that actually when the Sri Lankan president visited China. So Sri Lanka, Nepal, these small countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, good amount of influence China is having. Maldives. But other countries like Japan, Vietnam, Philippines, even Indonesia, China is not having so much amount of good relation. With Philippines, it is having actually antagonistic in terms of the water, the mass, in terms of where is that border. And with India, of course, its relationship is what you may call, sort of blow hot, blow cold, that type of a situation. So now, what would US would like to do is, US would like other countries to take a stand. It's very, and Trump is not somebody like John F. Kennedy or Lyndon Johnson or any of those people. Trump is 0-1 type of a politician. And they, the other leaders, including Reagan and Nixon, they accepted about, between 0 and 1, there can be a lot of gray areas. And if you recall, it was the Nixon time, Kissinger went to China and, that deal was struck and, the what one can call the enmity with China was minimized. Kissinger openly mentioned about it. But Trump is not like that. Trump is what you may loosely call a simpleton. 0 or 1. You are with me or you are against me. This gray and other thing he is not very comfortable with. And it is his type of a politics. So he is going to pressurize many countries. And according to me, he may even try to use these 4 states, which are part of this, what one can call Australia, Japan, India, and USA.
Quad.
Sorry?
Quad.
Yeah, Quad was, India has always been resisting to convert Quad into a military alliance, which very much US wants to do. India has always been telling Quad is for culture, Quad is for commerce, all these things. India is very cautious about it. But sooner or later, India will be forced to take a stand in order to make Quad into a military. And Japan and what one can call this Australia might not be very enthusiastic because currently the trade relation between Australia and China is on a positive mode. And kindly remember, significant amount of Australia's requirement of food articles and various other associated issues are from China. So Australia wants to keep a good relationship with China. And Japan is different because outside Japan, there is significant amount of GDP developed by its companies than inside Japan. Not many people are aware of it. The Japanese companies are doing extremely well all over the world. So, and Japan as a society is also shrinking. It requires huge amount of money to meet the old age pension and other thing. So it might go along with what you may call US. So India has to take a stand, and US is not going to leave India to have the pleasure of non-aligned and other things. I am convinced that this man, Trump, is not a person who is going to like this type of a non-aligned and other. He would like, you are with me or you are against me. This is a very, very interesting thing. And unfortunately, India has always had no proper influencing thing in China. I am given to understand China has got something like 12 centers to study India in many locations. India military, India culture, India civilization. India doesn't have any such thing at all. India has got one at JNU, which is more, appendix of the Chinese propaganda. And the other one is coming up in Ahmedabad, Rashtriya Raksha University, which has recently got formed. There is a China. Otherwise, our knowledge of China is all through New York Times and Washington Post. And interestingly, many Indians think, at least the right wing, thinks that Washington Post and New York Times are not reliable in terms of understanding India. But they somehow think it is reliable in understanding China. Anyhow, it's a very interesting thing. I have always been arguing we must try to study China, influence China. I have been telling from the 90s, we must publish this 𝗪𝗡𝗏𝗏, which is all that old I am telling about, not the current one. Earlier, 𝗪𝗡𝗏𝗏 into Mandarin and distribute it free of cost. The type of manga from Japan, the cartoon thing which are going in China is absurd actually. It's a very, very primitive one. We have phenomenal amount of this cartoon of the earlier ancient literature and other. And there is a huge group of goodwill for India. This we should recognize. There are some nitwits who do not understand. They say, no, don't trust China, don't. Who cares about I'm not talking about the ruling party of China, I'm talking about the Chinese society. For instance, when the virus was there, Wuhan virus, I call it Wuhan virus, otherwise it's so much death and other thing. In their politically powerful military publication, they published one article with a photograph of one side, a large number of people getting burnt in the ghats in Delhi. In those days there were mass type of a not burial,
Cremations.
cremation.
Cremations.
That was published on one side. Other side was some, something to price India or something. This, they have this Twitter equivalent, 𝗦𝗏𝗏. So many people criticize this. Why are you projecting this? In our country also, we are doing the same. We are burying large number of people or something. And finally, the politically powerful army newspaper, they withdrew it. Why I am telling this as a simple example is, there is a lot of goodwill for India, which we are not even understanding. And many elderly Chinese, I have been to China several times, I can tell with some amount of confidence, many elderly Chinese feel the next birth at least they should be born in India in order to go to moksha. The reason is Buddha is born in India. They are very, very strong believer. And now the government has also simplified. They have opened up large number of what one can call the Buddha's viharas and other things. Many of them have got actually Vishnu statues and Shiva statues. Common is Ganapati. Many of them, they are not anymore very, what you call closed or anything about it. But we have not exploited this at all. We have not, gone. For instance, Kanchi Shankaracharya was called by the Chinese, but that time our UPA government did not allow him. He says not required to go another thing. When our Sree went and started one branch in Shanghai, initially it was supposed to be held in a small room or something. The crowd was so much, they have to have it in a open air auditorium. Open air, not auditorium, open air stadium. So much amount of enthusiasm about this meditation, and we are such a dumbest country. We never exploit our soft power explicitly in these places. Wherever we again and again go to USA and then take pictures that in New York Park, so many people are doing. It's okay, so let them do it. We are not opposing it or anything. But the more important is to influence places like China, where there is a goodwill. I am talking about average Chinese citizen. I am not talking about 12% of the Chinese are only Communist Party members. This we should remember. This is their statistics. I am not telling. So there is a huge mass of people who are interested in many things India. I will tell an example. It could be an aberration. It doesn't matter. I was in Shanghai School of Finance and Economics, and I was staying in the main road of Shanghai. Once I was coming in the late evening. It was very dark, and I saw some fellows like our own India. Many are selling on the road actually, and they are periodically caught by the cops. So these people hide and seek type of thing. They come and he was selling some apple and berry and other. I was impressed. I took something. I was to pay him. Believe me, sir. He asked. In China, they don't know Indian. They call it Hindu. That's a word they use for all people. Hindu. He told yes. You know what? He didn't want to accept my money. He told you take it. I can't believe this. Of course, this is. I'm not telling that you go to China and everything will get free or anything like that. I'm just telling a gesture on the part of one individual. And everywhere I have gone, I have phenomenal amount of enthusiasm and respect for Hindus. Except that only major problem is food, because they don't understand what is vegetarian. That's the only major. They don't have an idea of vegetarian. Once I was given a dish by a well-intentioned Chinese telling it is vegetarian. My American friend near me told, don't touch it, it's a frog. Frog cooked well. I was shocked actually. Why are they calling? See, some cabbage was on top of it. So whenever there is a small vegetable in a dish, it's called vegetarian. That is their understanding of vegetarian. Anyhow, that's the only major drawback, because they have gone from rice eating to completely into this mutton and chicken, and they treat rice eaters as poorer people who are in the lower classes and other thing. So many things are there. We should continuously have interaction with them. In India, according to me, we should create at least 10 centers to study China. Many of you may not be knowing, Chinese government has allowed long time before the Tamil radio broadcasting. And there are a couple of Tamils who are staying in Peking, and they are doing the broadcasting. Of course, propaganda partly for Chinese communism and other thing in those days, and then some items on food and culture and other. The point is, I don't think we ever had anything from the Indian, who is to represent Indian culture and civilization, it will be mostly an Englishman or an American, not even our own people. You tell me, Chinese, when they give speeches about their history or philosophy and other thing, it's always the Chinese professors who do it. They are not allowing any or white man to propagate about them or something. Point is, there is a huge amount of distance between us without knowing, and they have, the old saying, which is factual. The ambassador 𝗠𝗎 in the 1941-42 convocation address of Harvard, he told, India conquered China without firing a single bullet. It's there in the literature published. And what he meant is, India conquered China by its literature, music, art, architecture, and other things. Those days they used to come to Burma side and carry many of these things back to China. That is how we conquered China. When Chiang Kai-shek ran away from the mainland, he went to Taiwan. Taipei, it's called. I've been to Thailand, and the first huge museum is there on a hilltop. The first floor of the museum is full of Indian artifacts, Indian Sanskrit literature, Pali literature, and various type of things. I was told that Chiang Kai-shek, when he left China, he left with something like 14 to 15 ships. 7 of the ships contained material pertaining to India. He felt these are the treasures which you have to preserve. And he took them away with him, actually. So, we have to understand that without any antagonism or anything, and some land is held by them and other thing, we have to negotiate. I am not telling we give up anything, but we should be very clear that they don't have any animosity towards us. Similarly, we should not also have any start with, don't trust Chinese, they are dangerous. All these things are very, it's a politically useful jargon. Otherwise, no. Point I want to stress is, in the emerging major conflict between US and China, mark my word, next 10 years, this is going to be the global problem. Other than that, the problem associated with the Islam terrorism in Europe. Europe has to fight its own, this jihadi groups in terms of the old, they can say that they have been fighting this for a long period of time. Otherwise, Europe is economically very weak today. Germany is shrinking actually. And they are not going to fully take the Trump side. Most important is France and Germany have got enormous amount of economic interest in China. They are not going to immediately jump to the Trump bandwagon, but they are also not anymore a major power or anything. Now Chad and Niger and so many African countries are asking France to get out of their location. They are not very enthusiastic in having any military camps of France or something. So this Macron is the only one who is traveling around, who can't have a proper government in his own country. They had 4 governments within a matter of 1 year. And the current one again is within 15 days going to face a no confidence motion and go away. So this Germany, France and England and other thing are all old, like fused bulbs. They are like retired civil servants who don't, who think they are still in power, but who don't have any amount of global influence or power. So the major war is between China and US. War in the sense, I am not telling it will be directly, there will be a physical war or anything. It's going to be a technology based, manufacturing industry based, and various other type of deep sea ocean and your cyber, who is going to conquer, all that will play a very major role in that. So India should be very clear. And because what has happened is quite a number of Indian officials, Indian ministers and others have their umbilical cord tied to China. Their children are in China, their son and daughters-in-law are in China. And they are.
Did you mean US, sir? Did you mean US, sir?
Huh?
Not China.
Sorry, yes.
Did you mean?
Sorry, very sorry. Yes. So we say that look east, but our neck is always turned to west, not east. We cannot, and our neck cannot move in both the direction. That is another problem. Most of our leaders are neckless, I call it, and without any necklace mean not neckless, LESS. You see our leaders sing, they cannot. And there is also the way in which we have been brought up, and language, for instance, is a major barrier in dealing with China. Even though now China is also increasingly using English, but India is more that way towards US on various other counts. And green card is the ultimate what one can call the entry to the Paramapadam, which you get, Vaishnav. It's a sort of a opening which you get. So that's a very unfortunate thing, but that cannot fully influence our attitude. So we have to play it very, very nicely. Very, very difficult, I am telling you, because there will be a huge pressure on India to join the US camp. My great worry is, which hopefully will never come true, India should not become a Ukraine for China. This is the most important thing, because we can be arm twisted and various other. Kindly note, Biden himself voted for the cryogenic engine supply against that in the Senate committee very enthusiastically. So we shouldn't go by, what one can call just by what this current dispensation is. They can be very nasty. They can. Another major thing is many of the people in power of Indian origin, they somehow think that India and US should be completely aligned, which is not necessarily to be the case. That is another, because it's Obama told happy Diwali, then everybody became very happy. The US knows that India is very, very silly country. As one professor told, even a tie given there can influence the joint secretaries and everything. So that is our expectations are very low from the white people. And a tie given to a secretary is enough. But in the case of China, we want 1,000 acres of land back and other thing. Mautai or a single tie will not be enough. So the point is, I am seriously mentioning, we should play the balancing act, come what may. We shouldn't fall to the predilections of the Indian group in US. Indian group in US is very useful, very good. They have achieved a lot of things. They have, occupied very major positions and other things. That doesn't mean that we should, take active role in terms of pro-US stance or anything like that. I'm not telling we should be anti-US or anything, but this 0-1% should be kept at a distance. We are not going to be 1 nor 0. We will take care of our interest, most important. And let us be very, very clear, China is our younger brother. Whether you like it or not, civilizationally we are tied to China. Even though genetically we are tied to US. So this is a very important and interesting thing. And how we are going to deal with it is very, very critical, and we should plan for it. Strategically, we should plan for it. We shouldn't go by emotions. That is not going to be helpful at all. We should use our brain and we should work on it. And we are third country, we are third bigger, and third is okay, but the gap between us and the second is so large. We are not going anywhere. So, let me summarize. Coming 10 years minimum, it's a conflict between US and China. China is as of now emerging as a single superpower. And we shouldn't lose our goodwill with China. We should try to influence Chinese society more than the government. We shouldn't. They are allowing it. Now they are allowing so many, different type of ideas and other thing to go into their social network. So we should understand China from Indian eyes, not from the US lens. We should put our lens and then look at China. And we shouldn't too much, growl and go to US side or anything. Of course, another dimension which I didn't fully cover is US will now try to play Russia against China. They are very, very worried about the alliance between Russia and China. One of the target of US will be to cut this alliance and how to make Russia move away from China. This is going to be another interesting dimension. Anyhow, we are not again going to be involved in that. We are going to be friendly with Russia, independent of whether Russia is going to be with China or against China or whatever it is. So, what I want to stress is we should be worried about our interest and nothing more or nothing less. This, 1 lakh more H1Bs should not immediately make us jump with joy. And in other words, our foreign policy should not be fully linked only with the views of the the Indian diaspora in US. They have their own liking, they have their own thing. Let them do it. We are not against it or anything. But to satisfy that, we cannot immediately jump to the Trump bandwagon. I hope Iyer will be with me because Iyer is one of the major participant in terms of the oasis, right? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Let's take a few questions now. Yeah. Naresh Nilakantan says, Namaskarams, how are our Agniveers and other new military preparations coming together to defend any worst case scenario?
Yeah, we are very well prepared. Since our military budget is phenomenally gone up. Let's not be and then we are one of the major exporters of defense equipment in the world today. People are not, getting these statistics and other things. We are the third or fourth largest exporter of defense equipment. And I think we are not going to have any war with any country. And, our PM has also been telling this is not the time for war. We would try to avoid it. And we have what is called unknown persons, unnamed persons taking care of our interest in other countries. Right? Okay.
Next one, please. Vignesh wants to know, Professor, though we claim to be the highest growing economy, is 7% growth rate really a good growth for a country with 150 crore people? Should we not optimally grow at 14% to grow double our GDP in 5 years?
Yeah, namely, this is one of the biggest challenges, but it is not going to be very easy. That is what we have to realize. We are, our manufacturing base has to phenomenally increase. Hopefully, in the next 5 to 10 years, we will be able to increase our manufacturing base. Even then, we can attempt only something like 10%, not 14%. Thank you.
Sir, these are all current prices, sir, not constant prices. So there is also inflation factored in. Next one, please. Muthukumar Sundaram wants to know, Professor, are we to improve the parity between purchasing power and income within Bharat, or exclaim about China and do inadequate measures to improve our economy?
No, the purchasing power and income within Bharat is significantly getting what one can call reduce the gap. We are not understanding one thing. Large portion of our purchasing power is with the so-called small and medium businesses. There was a report that Panipuri Wala in Marina Beach had 40 lakh annual income. It was found because he has been using GPay and other thing continuously. So what I want to stress is, have you ever checked what is the freelance plumber's income? Right? A visit charges these days 700 to 1000. Right? If he visits even 2 houses, he makes something like 2000 per 1500 per day. Multiply and then find out. So large number of these self-employed people and small business people have become reasonably, I would not say they have become very rich and other thing. So this what one can call a lot of changes are taking place, and we are still using the 1960s and 1970s poverty slogan, which is not true anymore. Okay, next.
Manmohan Gupta wants to know, sir, what's your view on US debt and de-dollarization? Talked by Dr. Ankit Shah.
No, this US debt is a very interesting thing. Not many people understand. Large portion of US debt is held by outside China, India, Taiwan. So many countries are holding US debt. And so to that extent, these countries are not happy with dollar getting eroded. If dollar value falls, who is most worried? China, not others. Now, parity, of course, is something like, if I remember, 7 yuan to $1. But with all the currencies, if it fall, because all the 2/3 of the dollar is outside US. Whatever is printed, 2/3 of those with all that Washington and various other pictures are all outside US. So de-dollarization is not going to be very easy. It's going to be a very complex and complicated matter. And our own 𝗘𝗍𝗻𝗁 was 5 years in that, what is that called, BRICS. He was supposed to do something. He was a banker, and I think he didn't do anything. He just happily spent time and came back. And so it cannot, we are not telling that it cannot be done, and it's not an easy task, de-dollarization. That is what I want to stress. Okay?
𝗏𝗚𝗡𝗍𝗍, in his wisdom guided by Chanakya Neeti, don't you think that Modi would be adroit enough to avoid taking sides? After all, America is no longer great or mighty in spite of its military.
100%. I agree with you totally, but the only problem is, it's not just, everybody thinks Modi is the one who decides everything. But there is a huge group of what you may call influencer and people who suggest things and people who. So it's a massive systemic problem. So who are all going to, all of them may not have Chanakya Neeti in their brain. So many mistakes have been done by BJP as well as by the government. For instance, RRR was in such an important position for a long period of time, and now people are telling no, Raghuram Rajan should not have been. Aravind Subramanian, I can quote so many. There is one leader called 𝗟𝗏𝗪 in Tamil Nadu. Of course, I jokingly say he can conduct all-party meeting by himself because he has been in all the parties. Anyhow, he was given Rajya Sabha seat for from Madhya Pradesh, 2 terms. Can you believe that? Finally, he landed up in Congress and he is attacking this BJP. My point is, it's not very easy in a large country like India to only, so many errors have been committed. Whoever thought with the Mahbooba Mufti of all people, you will form a government in J&K. She is such a, treacherous. Fortunately, she lost heavily in this previous election. So many. So it is Chanakya Neeti and see, Modi alone is not the one who decides everything. He has so many amount of pressures and counter pressures. I always say many a time in Delhi, what the right hand is doing, the right hand is not knowing. That is the type of a position. It's a very treacherous place. Which one? Delhi. So so I agree with you. This should be but it is not necessarily true. Okay.
SG Krishna wants to know, Professor RV, sir, everyone is saying that Chinese economy is slowing down and population is aging. If this is true, do you see any changes of China destabilizing, and also your thoughts?
Yeah, no. This aging population, all this will have an impact after perhaps 20, 30 years. Not today. Today, the impact will be more on South Korea, Japan. These are the countries which are really suffering due to aging population. Their economy is slowing to 5% only. The rate of growth is not so good as in the past because of the problem associated with the real estate on. And Trump buying Greenland, I mentioned about it. He doesn't want to give Arctic any space for China to expand or do anything. And Greenland has got huge amount of resources. That is also we have to remember. Trump is not a fool to get Greenland. Okay. Next.
Mangat Ranga wants to know, Professor Namaskar, Trump is expected to sort issues between Bharat and Bangladesh. What are his options? Shouldn't Bharat have its own independent strategy?
Bharat should have independent strategy, no doubt about it. I don't think he will immediately sort issues between Bharat and Bangladesh. What could happen is, if everything goes as per plan, like 𝗠𝗢𝗙 𝗍𝗏 becoming the head of the internal security and Kash Patel becoming FBI, they will put some pressure on Bangladesh to minimize the issues. Already the Bangladesh chairman is, leader Yusuf is talking in terms of holding election and other thing. And they will try to minimize the impact. And but Bangladesh has got solid support from China. This is one thing. Same thing Pakistan. So this how Trump is going to deal with that is something interesting. We have to wait and watch. What is the way in which he is going to deal with this situation? Let's not jump into that. We will wait.
Thank you so much, Professor RV. And that brings us to close of today's program. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.
Namaskar. How was the audience, Iyer?
Sir, 1 second. 1 second, sir.